Welcome to These Small Hours podcast. My name is Russell Cordell Staker, and I'm delighted that you're here. I'm broadcasting from Austin, Texas, where I live, and today is Saturday, the 2nd of May, 2020. This is the inaugural episode, the beginning of something that I'm going to be doing each week going forward, in which I am going to read an essay that I've written, and then I will publish that essay also on my website, which I will detail later so that you can find that. For me personally, this is an opportunity to add an additional sharpening tool to my own writing. I'm in the process of completing my first novel right now, and this first season is going to focus on various topics that have been centered in and around the particular book that I'm writing, although these essays are standalone. They're not the novel itself. I'm going to let the essay speak for itself. The intent of this going forward after I read my essay is I'll give a little bit of extemporaneous background and just some further thoughts, but I'm going to keep these very spare. I don't anticipate this podcast or any of its episodes being anywhere beyond 30 minutes. In most cases, they'll probably be anywhere from 10 to 15 minutes. But this is, I had mentioned, whether anyone listens down the road or not is really not my concern. This is an opportunity for me to continue to write on the side of my own novel pursuits and to express myself with essays that I want to give voice to on this podcast. This is a very grassroots effort. You're going to probably hear screaming kids in the background now and then. I don't have a studio other than an office from which I write. And, it's going to be what it's going to be. I'm not going to overly script it. Obviously, I will be reading word for word the essays that I've written. But I'm going to keep this as an open dialogue. I will also state openly that the intent of this is not to have a rant, to be overly political, overly religious, overly economics-based. There are all kinds of topics that can be quite offensive to people. I'm not going to shy away from certain things, but the focus of my own writing, the interest of my reading, the passion that I have is about staying grounded in our humanity. And this is a safe space. It's an opportunity to reach into the things that I think matter most to all of us, regardless of what our backgrounds are, what our culture is. And hopefully, if it opens a door for us to have a better dialogue, then I think it's worth listening to. At least for me as a writer, it's going to help me to hone in the tone and the quality, the emotional intelligence that is so vital and important to my own writing. So today's preamble is a little bit longer than I'll normally do. I'll typically start the podcast by just introducing the title of the essay, then I'll read it, and then, like I said, I'll give a little bit of a perspective at the very end. But today I just wanted to give a little more context. The beautiful thing is I know that I have 0 listeners right now, and quite frankly, if I do this for 2 years, I might get a couple. But I'm really not interested in a huge body of listeners. If they come, they will come as in the field of dreams. If I write it, I believe they'll come. The power of this podcast is not that I'm podcasting, it's the power in my writing. And I believe firmly that not only is it going to make me a better writer, but I think it will open doors for listeners who will take an interest in the things that I'm writing. One final point, my first novel, which is soon to come out, is actually titled In These Small Hours. And that's where I got the derivation of the title for this podcast, These Small Hours. Not the exact same title, but there you have it. So with that said, the first essay that I'm going to read today is entitled Big Pockets. Big Pockets by Russell Cordell Staker. I noticed the cleaners. Doesn't matter where. They pass by pushing utility carts. They are quiet, stoic, aware, usually all too kind. They are focused, nonplussed. They spend their days invisible. No one wants their job. The work they do is hard, unpleasant. There is no pretense with a cleaner, just understated nobility. I don't think I've ever seen a cleaner I didn't think was beautiful. There are a few small details about D-Day that have always impressed me based on my own reading and consideration of the event 30 years, nearly to the day, before I was born. First, on June 5, 1944, at around 4 in the morning, General Dwight D. Eisenhower and his staff at SHAEF, Supreme Headquarters Allied Expeditionary Force, met quietly in London, England. The weather reports leading up to Operation Overlord had been ill-advised for months. Timing was off, and the Allied forces were literally coming down to their final window of opportunity to unfurl the massive armada that had been building throughout early 1944. On that fateful morning, there was slightly good news. It appeared there would be a break in the weather, and that it would hold for no more than 48 hours. Eisenhower knew the risk he was considering. He also understood that if he didn't act at that moment and take advantage of the opening in the clouds, the invasion at Normandy may not happen at all. Eisenhower listened. He looked into the eyes of his advisors sitting around the table and then said 3 decisive words. "Okay, let's go." And with that, he got up and walked out of the room and down to his driver and waiting car. The woman behind the wheel looked at Ike and saw the light in his eyes. He told her, "It's on, and nothing is going to stop us now." Second, Americans awoke the morning of June 6, 1944, to the sound of ringing bells all across this great nation. FDR had ordered that church bells be ringing throughout the day to remind the country of the terrible cost that was being paid with the blood and courage of our young boys in Western Europe. People gathered in great and small groups to look into each other's eyes, to hold each other, and to pray. I can only imagine the emotion of that moment all across America and the world. Third, I'm reminded of a particular scene in Steven Spielberg's film Saving Private Ryan, after the Allied forces have attained the beaches of Normandy at Omaha and Utah. A food station has been set up where thickly cut corned beef and Spam sandwiches are piled high on a clean but dirty-fingered plate, and adjacent to it, a full kettle pot of steaming black coffee is being poured out of a long-necked spout into a tin cup held tightly in the charred hand of a soldier. After the horror of heavy combat and the inexplicable courage to face the abyss, weary men found sublime comfort in a cup of coffee, a cigarette, a piece of chocolate, in the sound of the air and the sea. These details stir my soul. My father told me a story one night when I was little. It's about a large man in big overalls who carried a handicapped boy up a mountain. Dad was 17, working on staff at Camp Tracy Wigwam the summer of '66. These details I got later when I was older, and I'd ask him to tell me again about the man with the big pockets and the boy in the wheelchair with the small crooked feet. It wasn't much of a story, really, just a point of observation with the kind of details that never leave you. As he would retell it, I remembered the first time I heard it. Me, tucked neatly in my little bed in our yellow house on Beach Street in Caldwell, Idaho. It would have been the fall of 1981. Dad sitting on the floor with his back to my mattress, me listening, as he describes a small boy scout in a metallic silver wheelchair, excited to take a high-adventure hike with his troop, and a younger version of my dad trying to explain to the little boy why he can't go on the hike. And then out of nowhere, a big burly man in faded farming overalls stepping forward to declare, "I'll carry the boy up the mountain," as he lifts the scout from the wheelchair and situates him in a piggyback hold, sliding the boy's misaligned feet into his big pockets so that the boy can rest his weight inside of them as he is carried onward by this giant of a man. Those big pockets. Sometimes the stories we tell ourselves are completely wrong. They're focused on things that don't really matter and usually make no sense. Distortion and disillusionment blur the lens of our vision and prevent us from seeing the stories we should tell ourselves. Most of the time, we let others tell us the stories, and we take no part in the journey. This is truly a great tragedy. I don't need much in life. I refuse to go blindly through life. I want to feel what there is to feel. I want to be more aware. I think if there is a purpose, it's to sponge up as much of the good stuff and remember how it feels when it's sponged up, how it's changing me, changing how I think and what I say to those I meet along the way. These small hours are all that matter. In them, I try to listen with more sensitive ears, try to see with more sensitive eyes. These Small Hours podcast is the direct outlet for essays I've written. Here are short-form pieces of thought about life and letters, art, and humanity that I have created. I choose to shine a light on the simple things I notice, which comprise all the reasons why I write. These small hours matter. I give them indefinite leave to remain. I trust they will remain with you. I offer them freely. Thank you for being here. Rise and walk with me, or if you cannot, I have big pockets. I can carry you. I wrote that essay on the 22nd of April, 2020, and I'm now recording it on the 2nd of May again, 2020. As I'd mentioned in the preamble, and then obviously as I read the essay, the intent of this is to have an open forum where I will have the opportunity to actually read what I've written in essay format. The sources for this various essay are personal. I did do a lot of extensive reading on World War II and have ongoing throughout my life. Some of the authors that come to mind are Stephen Ambrose, certainly Jeremy Isaacs of the BBC during his penultimate World at War series, which I believe is 10 or 12 episodes. And then from there, various readings by Conrad Black about FDR, the writings of Winston Churchill. The story, obviously, about my father and the gentleman with the big pockets actually took place at a camp, as I'd mentioned, Camp Tracy Wigwam. It would have been in the Uintas of Utah back in the summer of the 60s. My dad grew up in Idaho Falls, Idaho. And when I was a little boy, we did live in Idaho for a period of time. I technically was born in Utah and grew up in the Denver area. But as a young boy, we lived outside of Boise in Caldwell. So my growing up years are very much grounded in the Rocky Mountain West between Idaho, Utah, and Colorado. And a lot of the resourcing in terms of my thoughts as I wrote this essay harkens back to those times and the memory of what my father taught me. I will also state that my dad passed away on October 22nd, 2016, and the novel that I'm about to complete in these small hours in many ways is a love letter to my dad, even though it's a completely fictionalized story. And as I'd mentioned, the essays that I'm going to be recording, at least in this first season, are going to be thematically around some of the things that I was considering while I was actually writing that novel. I'm very grateful that you're here, and I look forward to the next essay in the coming week. Thank you.